Have you ever felt like the world's problems are just getting, well, more complicated?
Uh-huh.
Like the old ways of doing things, just aren't cutting it anymore?
Absolutely. That feeling, that sense of complexity, maybe even overwhelm.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're getting into today.
So this deep dive is all about how graduate and professional education needs to change, right? To tackle these really tough challenges.
These wicked problems, as they're often called.
Wicked problems.
Yeah.
Okay.
And our mission today is really digging into this article by Eric Kaufman and Nicole Stedman.
Right. The one titled Moving Graduate and Professional Education Forward.
That's the one. We want to unpack their ideas on how higher education can, well, better prepare people for collaborative leadership.
Especially in this, uncertain world we seem to be in.
Exactly.
So it's not just about getting another degree then, or like adding letters after your name.
No, not at all. It's much deeper than that. We're talking about a real shift, a transformation in how we even think about leadership for the future.
And that goes right down to the structure of advanced education itself.
You've really hit on something important there. It's kind of striking, actually. People like Kasuto were questioning the whole purpose of grad school way back in 2015.
Really? What was the question?
Well, is it only about churning out future professors? Or should we be focusing on, other crucial roles and pathways too?
And that's still being debated.
Oh, absolutely. It's a point of contention, you could say, among faculty worldwide, even today.
And meanwhile, the world outside academia hasn't exactly stood still, has it?
Not even close.
Yeah.
The whole landscape has shifted. I mean, think about it after the 2008 recession,
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
right? The number of PhD students in the U.S. shot up by almost 40,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And people started questioning, is this degree really worth it with the job market being so shapy?
So higher ed pushback.
They did, yeah. Mostly by broadening access, opening the doors wider.
Okay, so you have more students, a shifting job market, but the core structure stays the same.
That's the puzzle. Kasuto pointed out that the basic familiar structure hasn't really budged in like a century.
A century, seriously.
Pretty much. Even basic things like how dissertations are judged differently across fields, that's been a source of criticism for ages.
That kind of stagnation, it sounds problematic.
It can be. But thankfully, it's not all doom and gloom. There is a push for new models.
Okay, good. Like what?
Well, people like Walker and his colleagues, over 10 years ago, were calling for a more progressive approach.
What should that involve?
Things like development, integration, and especially collaboration. They even talk about a community-based model,
Community-based, meaning?
meaning students learn from a whole team of faculty, not just, one single mentor.
Oh, okay. More diverse input.
Exactly. And we are actually seeing some of these innovative ideas being put into practice around the world now.
So if grad school itself has been slow to adapt, what does that mean for the leaders it's supposed to be producing?
Well, that brings us to a really critical point, doesn't it? This urgent need for a totally new way of thinking about leadership itself.
Yeah.
Barbara Kellerman, she's a big name in leadership studies.
Mm-hmm.
She even criticized what she calls the leadership industry, basically saying it's failed.
Failed? How?
Failed to prepare leaders for the kind of complex societal problems we're facing today.
That's a pretty strong critique.
It is. And I think there's a lot of truth to it. Higher education often doesn't really inspire that, lifelong learning habit you need for these unpredictable challenges.
So the old classroom lecture model isn't enough.
Definitely not. Professional learning needs to, as the source puts it, leap beyond traditional teacher-centered approaches.
So what's the alternative?
Kellerman talks about using reality as a context for learning,
Yeah.
tapping into real expertise, actual lived experience, and getting deeply embedded in solving practical problems.
Okay, that makes sense. Learning by doing, but on a much deeper level.
Precisely. And this isn't just theory, We're seeing growing evidence that things like team science are really the future for collaborative work.
Team science, like scientists working together more.
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge shift away from that old image of the lone genius academic.
Right, towards something more like, what was it called? The engaged scholar.
That's the term, yeah. Someone focused on making a real-world impact, not just, climbing the academic ladder.
And does this apply specifically to graduate students? Is leadership development different for them?
That's a really key point. What works for undergrads may not cleanly translate, as the research says.
Why not?
Well, grad students just come in with more. More developmental experience, more professional background, a richer foundation of knowledge. Educators have to account for that.
Okay, so you need a more sophisticated approach.
Right. And linking this back to the bigger picture, it points towards a major shift,
Yeah.
really emphasizing team-focused leadership in grad programs.
Building collective capacity.
Exactly. Researchers are clear. Leadership education has to incorporate broader collective capacity building. That's how we solve these really pressing, complex, wicked problems.
It sounds fundamental.
It is. So much so that even science, which historically idolized the individual, now actively prioritizes team science when handing out funding.
Oh, okay. That's a big change.
It really is. And it underlines something else, too. Meaningful leadership development isn't a quick fix.
You can't just do a weekend workshop.
Exactly. It needs a long-term, intentional, and strategic process, that 2-day seminar. It might raise awareness, sure, but one study found it doesn't actually change behavior long-term.
So complex skills need complex
You
training.
got it. Things like emotional intelligence, real teamwork, they need equally complex instructional methods developed over time.
Okay, let's zero in on this term you mentioned earlier, wicked problems. What exactly are they?
Right. So Keith Grant talks about how wicked problems whirl all around us, especially now in this supposed age of uncertainty.
Whether it's truly unprecedented or not might be debatable, maybe.
Yeah, perhaps. But what's not debatable is that we absolutely need to focus on these kinds of problems.
So how does Grint define them?
He gives us a helpful typology, actually. He distinguishes between critical, tame, and wicked problems.
Okay.
Think of it on a spectrum of uncertainty. As the uncertainty about the solution grows, a problem shifts
From critical.
to tame and then ultimately to wicked.
And how does the response change?
Well, for critical problems, you might use coercion or hard power, direct commands. For tame problems, it's more about management, processes. But for wicked problems,
Yeah, it's something else.
yes, you need normative and collaborative approaches. Soft power, asking questions, facilitating working together. And that space, that uncertainty, that's where leadership really happens.
Can you give an example? Make it a bit more concrete.
Sure, let's take healthcare. Someone comes in with acute pain, like a broken bone. That's often a critical problem. You can fix it relatively quickly, maybe with surgery or medication. Then maybe think about chronic pain. That might be more like a tame problem. It needs management, perhaps long-term therapy, established protocols.
Right. Manageable, even if difficult.
Exactly.
Leave
But
it.
then, a global pandemic.
Ugh. Wicked problem.
Classic wicked problem, incredibly complex, no single easy answer. It keeps changing, involves countless stakeholders.
Got it. So the point for graduate students is,
The point is, pretty much all of them, whatever field they're in, will inevitably face situations demanding collaborative leadership that is characterized more by questions than answers.
which is why this kind of leadership education is so crucial now.
More vital than ever, arguably.
You know, the crisis in Ukraine back in 2022, that seems like it could be an interesting case study here.
Absolutely. It's quite insightful when thinking about leadership shifts. Remember President Zelensky's inaugural address in 2019?
Vaguely. Remind me.
He said something like, "Each of us is the president. This is not just mine. This is our common victory. And this is our common chance that we are responsible for together."
Wow. It's very cool.
It is, isn't it? Now, compare that feeling, that sentiment, with how the media often framed it.
Yeah.
You know, the two-minute war narrative.
Right. Focusing on individuals.
Exactly. That contrast really highlights a potential shift in how we understand what effective leadership actually looks like today.
That collective idea,
Yeah,
does it connect to any specific leadership theories?
it really does. Zelensky's words resonate strongly with a modern leadership discourse that Jonathan Western calls eco-leadership.
Eco-leadership. What's that?
Well, Western looked back over the last century or so and identified 4 main leadership discourses that have emerged.
Okay, what are they?
First, the controller, then the therapist, then the messiah figure, and finally, eco-leadership. This one is all about connectivity, interdependence, shared responsibility.
And that's seen as particularly relevant now.
Very much so. Many argue it's urgently needed for our time. And you can see how this kind of thinking, this paradigm, would be beneficial in almost any advanced degree program. It prepares people for complex, interconnected systems.
So it's really moving beyond just being the expert in your narrow field.
Absolutely. Kawa and colleagues made this point really clearly. They said, expertise in a given field is no longer sufficient for tackling wicked problems.
Even for scientists. They called them wicked scientists.
Yeah, kind of a catchy term.
Yeah.
But the point is, These experts also need to be really skilled at collaborating with a broad range of stakeholders.
So it demands an adaptive approach, where the answers emerge from the group.
Precisely, through collective inquiry, not just one person having all the answers.
Is this idea catching on in different professional schools?
Oh, definitely. It's spreading quite rapidly, actually. We're seeing much more attention to leadership studies in law schools.
Okay.
Medicine, business, veterinary medicine, religious studies, engineering, pharmacy, even dentistry.
Really? Across the board like that?
Pretty much. And the common thread, as the source material points out, is this growing recognition of the importance of collaboration and teamwork.
It's not just a nice to have anymore.
No, it's becoming seen as a core competency for professionals in the 21st century.
Okay, so if this is the need, how do we actually do it? How do we chart a path forward for transformative leadership education?
Right. Well, first, we need to avoid the superficial stuff. There's this sarcastic column in The Economist.
Oh, yeah. What did it say?
It was jokingly advising wannabe leadership gurus to strike the right note of unreality or connect dots that aren't even there.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
Right. But that kind of fluff, while it might sell books, obviously isn't going to help us tackle real, wicked problems.
So we need something more substantial.
Exactly. Kellerman's point again. Educators have to be more intentional with attending to the desired results, focusing on real impact.
So what does work? What does effective leadership education look like for, say, graduate students?
Well, research shows they really flourish through learning experiences that tap into the richness of their lived experience.
Using what they already know.
Yes, and their prior knowledge, and letting them directly apply concepts to what they're currently doing, their work or research.
Makes sense. Prepare them with skills that are broadly applicable.
That's the key. Skills for jobs that, let's be honest, may not yet exist yet. It's all about fostering adaptability.
Are there specific recommendations for programs?
Yes. Bloomquist and colleagues laid out 4 key ideas for interdisciplinary leadership grad programs, really leaning into adult learning principles, what's called andragogy.
Andragogy, like pedagogy, but for adults.
Sort of, yeah. It emphasizes leveraging their experience, self-direction. So recommendation 1, structure the learning environment to encourage interdisciplinary interactions.
Get people from different fields talking.
Exactly. 2, build reflection directly into each course. Don't just learn. Think about how you learned.
Okay.
3, expect students to bring their work and life into the conversation. Make it relevant.
Right.
And 4, this one's interesting, build instructor capacity to be comfortable with ambiguity.
That sounds challenging, especially in academia.
It really can be. There's often this, cultural pressure for professors to be the expert, to have the answers.
But wicked problems don't have easy answers.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So universities promote expertise, but they also value creating new knowledge through experimentation. Leadership educators need to lean into that experimental side, helping everyone, including themselves, get more comfortable with the unknown.
This connects to another framework you mentioned, LAP, leadership as practice.
Yes, this is a really powerful idea, championed by Joe Raylan. LAP basically reframes leadership. It's not about the traits of one heroic individual,
Right.
but rather leadership is seen as something that occurs as a practice, something people do together.
So it's leaderful, not leaderless.
Exactly. It's not chaos. It's distributed. Raylan outlines 4 key tenets of this leaderful practice.
Okay, what are they?
First, collective leadership. Everyone can contribute, serve, co-create. Leadership is shared.
Makes sense.
Second, concurrent leadership. More than one person can actually be leading at the same time in different ways. Third, collaborative leadership.
Yeah.
Anyone can speak for the group. It's based on mutual dialogue.
Okay.
And fourth, compassionate leadership. Always ensuring you preserve everyone's dignity in the process.
That sounds like a much more, humane approach.
It really is. And to make this practical, to actually develop this kind of practice, researchers came up with LAPD.
LAPD, leadership as practice development.
You got it. It involves 4 main principles to put LAP into action.
Let's hear them.
Okay. 1, reviewing and renewing how learners and their organizations even think about leadership. 2, surfacing and actually working with the real leadership processes and interactions happening.
Getting practical.
Very. 3, working in the learner's own context on their actual organizational problems and adaptive challenges.
Real world application.
Right. And 4, working with the messy stuff, the emotional and political dynamics of leadership within their system.
So LAPD is like a guided inquiry.
That's a great way to put it. It's an element of inquiry where Learners and facilitators or tutors collectively search for potential solutions together.
How would you actually teach this in a graduate program?
Well, that leads to a really compelling idea. Using collaborative leadership learning groups, or CLLGs, as a kind of signature pedagogy.
Signature pedagogy, what's that?
It's a term from Lee Shulman. He talked about signature pedagogies as core teaching methods that get students to do, think, and value what practitioners in the field are doing, thinking, and valuing.
Ah, like how case studies are used in business school, maybe?
Exactly like that. So the argument is that CLLGs, because they're so aligned with teamwork, with eco-leadership, and they're anchored in practice,
Mm-hmm.
they could be the signature pedagogy for graduate leadership education, helping students develop that LAPD mindset.
Okay, I can see how that fits together.
So connecting this all back,
Yeah.
the path forward seems pretty clear, doesn't
What
it?
are the key steps?
First, we really need to promote this ego leadership discourse. Talk about it, share it, not just with students, but with colleagues, administrators, everyone.
Make it part of the conversation.
Yes. And then, wherever possible, we could actively encourage using LAPD and tools like CLLGs in courses, workshops, professional development.
And not just in social science programs.
Absolutely not. This needs to extend into all professional domains, engineering, health, law, you name it.
So let's recap then. Today, we've really dug into how graduate and professional education needs a serious rethink, right?
A rethink to develop leaders who can actually handle these incredibly complex, wicked problems the world is throwing at us.
We looked at how advanced education itself has been slow to change.
And the urgent need for new leadership approaches beyond the individual hero model.
And we explored some really promising frameworks like eco-leadership and leadership as practice, or LAP.
And practical ways to develop it, like LAPD and collaborative leadership learning groups.
And it's important to remember, this isn't just some, academic debate happening in an ivory tower.
Not at all. This kind of transformation in how we educate future leaders. It will also create significant impacts on the way those graduates approach the work of the world. It affects everyone.
So the final thought really comes down to this quote we saw. If humanity truly aspires to address the grand challenges of today and tomorrow, then graduate education must be redesigned.
It's a powerful call to action.
It really is. So maybe the question for you listening is, how might you start integrating more collaborative, adaptive, collective ways of leading?
Right. In your own work, your community, your teams, regardless of whether you have a formal title or an advanced degree.
Because ultimately, tackling these wicked problems, navigating this complexity, it really is everyone's business, isn't it?
It has to be.